Hey friends, what's up? This is Metro, and today we're gonna go over the best build I've ever done in Deadlock. Not clickbait, not overhyping. I truly think this is the most synergistic build we ever had for Wraith. I think Wraith is back on the menu. I think Wraith is insane. Today we'll go over everything new with the character. We'll talk about the character in general after the changes, why I think she is way better than before, and probably one of the best iterations on Wraith. And I'll explain to you how to play her, okay? First things first. Wraith got changed quite dramatically. The ultimate got changed to a very different ability. Before, the ult used to travel to the enemy slowly, lift them up, and then keep them in the air for 1.75 seconds or 2 seconds, and then slam them down, right? And during the time they were in the air lifted, they couldn't do anything. They were stunned. Now Wraith ult travels very fast. The cast time is way faster. It's 0.4 seconds or 0.5 instead of 0.7 something. And it travels way faster. But it only picks them up really quick, slams them down really quick, and after they get disarmed and silenced, okay? So that means they can do nothing against you other than punching you or using items if they have them, okay? And I had a lot of people in my chat the last few days that think this ult is weaker. And I completely disagree. I think if you build around it correctly, it is a stronger ultimate, especially in the mid game. Now in the late game, the mass lift is gone. Once you level up telekinesis to maximum level, the maximum amount you can do is level up, lift up 2 people now, okay? So for stealing mid boss, it is obviously weaker. And for late game team fights where you hit to like 4 or 5 people, it is obviously weaker. But the power this ult gets in a 1v1 pickoff scenario, and the power it has in the mid game is so much stronger that you can snowball into the late game way harder, and you will do way more damage than before. There were a few items that were buffed that helped Wraith a lot, and full auto got insanely buffed. But we'll get into this during the build and I'll explain everything, okay? Laning stage is kind of similar to before, okay? We're still running monster rounds, basic magazine, and hollow point ward for the upfront damage. But we also added Enchanter's Barrier. And usually my builds are you are supposed to buy from left to right. So once you start the laning phase, right? Hollow Point Ward is just the first item that gives you a tiny bit more damage on cards, but more importantly, gives you a Spirit Shield, gives you basically 100 extra HP, and makes it, as long as you don't take a lot of damage, as long as you're above 65 HP, you deal more damage, right? So you pick this up first, and then I tend to pick up Infuser instantly, okay? And Infuser got an insane buff, and is probably in the top 3 items in the game for Wraith now, okay? So Infuser lasts for 8 seconds, okay? Instead of 6. Which is a really, really big deal for Wraith, because in the early game, back when you used to run Infuser, or if you were running Infuser in your build, you obviously want to use this with your cards, right? You still start off with leveling 2 in card, right? You go 1 and 2 in card, because you still want the 50 extra damage in lane, right? So you go for Hollow Point Ward, you will do a bit more damage with your gun and your cards, and then you go for Infuser. And now if you pop Infuser, it lasts for 8 seconds, which is a really, really long time in Deadlock, right? And for 8 seconds, now you can take your time to throw the cards. You can make sure that if you have Infuser, an extra charge, and ideally you are above 2200, so ideally you are above level 2 in cards, you can take your sweet ass time with throwing the cards, right? You pop this, and then you have enough time to make sure all 3 cards hit, maybe even a 4th if you charge, right, while shooting. So you have insane burst potential. The reason I didn't like it until last patch, during the 6-second cooldown, you were kind of forced to rush 3 cards really quick, right? And sometimes they would miss, and you wouldn't get the full value out of it, okay? But this item is insane, and we won't even sell it in the late game, because it synergizes insanely well with full auto as well for later on. But we'll get into that, right? Also, Infuser got a change. It now gives 70 Spirit Shield health instead of 50 health. Now that sounds like a net nerf on paper, right? Because it only works against Spirit, and it's a shield that you can break, and then it takes a minute or 2 to recharge. But notice how this works in conjunction with Hollow Point Ward. And then we go for Enchanter's Barrier as next item in lane. And at that point, suddenly you have 465 Spirit Shield, okay? That is a lot of health early on, okay? But more importantly, that also means that your Enchantress barrier will be active for basically the entire fight, unless you get like hard bursted down, right? The buff you get, the extra 20 spirit power and the cooldown, which got nerfed by a bit, will be active no matter what if you engage the enemy, right? So you get this full bonus damage, 20 spirit from Enchantress barrier if you pop Infuser plus another 16 in the lane, which brings cards back to kind of like really scary in lane. It's gonna end up doing like quite a lot of damage per card. So yeah, that's why we're running Enchantress, and this item is also really insane to stay alive. It just gives you effective HP. You want to play around keeping it kind of active, right? You don't want your barrier to be broken, but this makes you insanely tanky in lane, works insane against Pocket, works insane against Lady Guys, works insane against Yamato, because all those characters in the early game rely on bursting you down with spirit damage first and foremost, right? Now, against something like a Haze, it's obviously less useful, but again, we don't even care about the spirit shield only, we also care about the scaling it gives us on the cards, which is insane, okay? And then I still pick up monster rounds and basic magazine, mostly because we're going to use this after the laning stage to farm faster and to farm more efficiently and to burst down towers faster, right? These items are mostly there to really efficiently farm creeps, but also help us a ton with walkers, early walkers, which is one thing Wraith is still amazing at, split pushing and killing walkers really early in the game. And then I pick up extra stamina. This item is insane. And we have really a lot of freedom in the green slots in this build. There's really not a lot you have to run. Extra regen and healing right again. I only pick up if I need the regen. But with this build, I find myself to be like very sustainable. And I tend with this to pick up extra regen and healing right less. Okay. And then we go to the tried and tested Tesla bullet, right? This item is insane for farming on Wraith. Probably the best farming item on Wraith. And because this build is going to run even more spirit power, and by the way, this is going to be a gun build, okay? It's a gun build with spirit power, but because this build is going to have more spirit power, it makes Tesla even stronger, because Tesla shock damage does scale with spirit power, right? So as long as Enchantress barrier is on, you don't see this in the tooltip, but you have the extra 20 spirit power, which ups the damage of Tesla. Sadly, you can't see the extra spirit, like it doesn't show you in any of the tooltips, even in the skills, it doesn't show you the extra spirit you have from Enchantress barrier. Quick sale reload, self-explanatory for farming, right? More damage on the card and more fire rate. I call this the Metro Surge build, and the reason it is a gun build is because you mostly do damage with the gun. Now the thing is, the damage is not gonna be a lot of gun damage, it's actually going to be more spirit damage. Because in this build, what we end up doing is we're going to level up after laning stage, after getting 2 points in card track. We go 1 in full auto, 2 in full auto, okay, for the extra spirit damage. Then I tend to put 1 point in Project Mind for a faster or a longer range teleport, and 1 in telekinesis, just so it's lower cooldown. And then we max out full auto first. And full auto got an insane buff, okay? The scaling with spirit on level 5 is 0.1 instead of 0.05, okay? So before this patch, it was always 0.05. So the bonus damage you got from full auto with spirit wasn't even that good. But now, it gives us basically double the bonus damage based on the spirit power we have, if you level it to level 3. And in addition to that, okay, it does give us now 20% bullet lifesteal and 20% spirit lifesteal, okay? So, what does this mean in reality? Let me show you something, okay? We're now basically still in the early game, right? In fact, we can even end up selling, like, let's just demonstrate how much lifesteal do we get with this build. It would look like nothing, but in fact, it is the highest lifesteal Wraith ever had in the game, okay? It is 40% bullet lifesteal and 40% spirit lifesteal, okay? Because if you engage an enemy now, you pop Infuser early, and then you pop full auto, right? And full auto gives us 20 on both, right? We have bullet lifesteal on, and this is still, again, really early game, right? We have bullet lifesteal on, we pop Infuser, which gives us 20 spirit lifesteal for 8 seconds, and then we pop full auto. And what's gonna happen is, if you look at the left, suddenly we're sitting at 41% bullet lifesteal and 36% spirit lifesteal. And you might think, but Metro, that's not really useful because we mostly do bullet damage, right? You just shot. No, the funny thing is, again, because we are scaling with spirit power, and we go Surge of Power on the 3, on the full auto, that means our full auto gun is gonna do a lot of spirit damage, okay? And we're still gonna throw cards in between, but the longer the game goes, the worse cards get, okay? And the reason we put Surge of Power on our 3, and the reason this build is so insane and so beautiful. Surge of Power got buffed, first and foremost. It gives us 5% more fire rate bonus, so it gives 15% now, right? But it also kind of replaces our fleet foot that we used to run. So if we're in chase scenarios, we can chase up to the enemy and we can like keep up the pace, right? And what Surge of Power does during the 6-second activation timer, it gives us 2 meters a second movement speed, but it also maintains full speed while attacking, right? So it is basically a passive fleet foot activation, okay? But the reason this matters is you have to play the ult differently, right? The ult now only slams them down, silences them, right? The stun is not long, and then they can run away, right? But during the duration, and even on base, it's 2.5 seconds after the slam down, okay? After a slam down. So overall it lasts like 3 seconds. So even on level 1, even if you have no extra point of telekinesis, they have 3 seconds basically where they can't fight back, where they just have to run away from you, right? And what is the enemy gonna do if they can't fight back and run away from you? They will run away from you. The one downside the new ult has is they can move at full speed, right? So you wanna slow them down while still being able to chase them, which means we're gonna run slowing hex and we're gonna run slowing bullets. And you might, if you watched last video about Wraith, I literally mentioned in that video where I explained why fleet foot is better than slowing bullets. Because fleet foot gives you more movement speed than the movement slow that slowing bullets would give you if you slowed an enemy. But now we have Surge of Power active, which does the same thing, and slowing bullets plus slowing hex makes it so the enemy can't move after. So what happens in reality, if you get to this point, you engage in the fight, you pop Infuser first, slowing hex, and slam them, and they're gonna be very slow for a few seconds, and even after, right, the slowing bullets are still active, and during that time they can't do anything. Again, as long as you see that purple aura around the enemy, that means they are affected by the ult, which means that is armed and silenced, right? So yeah, so they're slowed to quite a significant amount, and that is like combating the new weakness of the Wraith ult, which is that they can run away, right? That's why we're running slowing bullets and Surge of Power. And again, we can skip the fleet foot because Surge of Power gives us the movement speed penalty removal when we use it. And full auto not only scales in damage with the imbue, right? So not only does the damage go up, right now the damage is 8.9, and if I buy per bullet, 8.9 per bullet, and if I buy Surge of Power, it goes up to 13.5 per bullet, right? So that's already like a 40% increase in damage of the full auto, the spirit damage. But also, it scales in duration, right? So without Surge of Power, the full auto lasts right now at this point in the build, it lasts for 7.5 seconds. But with Surge of Power, it lasts for 10 seconds, right? Or 10.6, okay? That means this also works with Infuser. If you pop Infuser before you start full auto, the duration is going to go up even more, and the damage is going to go up even more. The reason you want to pop Infuser before you even start full auto is if you start it after, yes, it's going to do more damage per bullet, but the duration is going to be slower. If you pop Infuser and full auto, and look at my gun here, as long as it's purple, it's active, and this stays active at this point for a very long time. I think it's around like 14-15 seconds. I don't want to lie, right? Because we have the bonus spirit from Infuser, the bonus spirit from Surge of Power, and the Enchanter's Barrier, right? So this all goes into the build. And if you look at the damage it does now, it is pretty ridiculous. Look at the damage that this does, right? You engage, pop Infuser, lift, and you are doing insane damage. And if you look at the numbers, right, you will realize we're actually doing more spirit damage right now than we're doing gun damage. So in reality, we're doing like 40% gun damage, 60% spirit damage. Our lifesteal, that is 40% on both during the 8 seconds of me having Infuser, right? Our lifesteal is as powerful as a vampiric burst, basically. Surge of Power and just bullet lifesteal and Infuser, right? So for basically, for like 3k, you get 40% lifesteal on both. the full auto, the 20% extra lifesteal on both, is gonna last for like 15, 16 now, right? So we have it basically for the entire fight. It's insane. I know I've been yapping so much about this build, but the synergies in this are insane, right? So you cannot die anymore, and you do insane damage early. And I truly think this is the meta. Some people asked me if you could run it on the cards, and I think you can. It's gonna end up dealing a bit less damage. But I just really think that the value of having full auto on for the entire fight with all the lifesteal, like super early on in the game already, right? And all the damage is worth way more. The one thing that seems weaker sometimes is the ult. But I think there's also a lot of cases or a lot of fights where the ult is better because you have longer to punish them. For example, I feel like the ult is now way better against a Shiv if you go up against a Shiv. Why? Before Shiv got lifted, Shiv is a pretty tanky character, you couldn't really burst him down by the time, you know, he came down from the air. And then he could like attack you, lifesteal you back. But now Shiv can't do anything, right? He's disarmed, and if we level this up to level 2, which we're gonna have at this point, right? He's disarmed for almost 3.5 seconds after he's off the ground, right? So this like, and at that point he can just walk around slowly and do nothing to you, and you're shooting him. And if you were low before, you're basically back to full HP. And if you weren't low before, it doesn't matter, you're full HP. And then we go into duration extender. And I notated this here because it's really a weird choice. I sell at this point, usually I need a flex slot at this point, I sell extra charge. Okay? And by the way, if you have to sell something before, you can sell monster rounds, right? But I sell extra charge, and that seems so weird, right? But duration extender works with all of what we just described, okay? Extends the time of infuser to 9 seconds, okay? So infuser lasts even longer, right? It extends the slowing duration of slowing hex on the enemy, okay? It extends your ult silence to almost 4 seconds. It extends your full auto to now a ridiculous amount if you pop it, right? So yeah, TLDR, it just makes every single thing that works with this build works better with duration extender. And the reason we're not buying this earlier is we really want the core 3. Surge of Power is our power spike. Before we buy Surge of Power, we don't really have a lot of damage, right? This is like the farm build, the farm mode, where we can go from camp to camp, still pop full auto, have Tesla ready, right? Reload with Quicksilver Reload, which I still put on the cards, by the way, right? It's still better to put it on the cards because you can reload whenever. And then Bullet Lifesteal so we don't die. So this is the farm mode. And then Surge of Power is our major power spike. And the damage literally, like, I don't want to lie, but if we compare damage here, before Surge of Power, let's just shoot for 1 magazine. So before Surge of Power, we're doing a total of 1,700, 2,700 around there, right? 2,700, most of it gun damage. And then after Surge of Power, which is a 3k item, we do... Suddenly, we're doing another 300, 400 extra. You empty your magazine incredibly quick with this build, right? Because you have the bonus fire rate from Quicksilver, you have the bonus fire rate from Surge of Power, right? And you don't really have a lot of magazine perks, which is why after Duration Extender, I tend to go for Titanic Magazine. Now, it's on you to decide what you need. If you want more damage up front, and you feel like they still don't die fast enough, you go Burst Fire first, which is just gonna add more damage even, right? Like, again, we want fire rate with this build because our damage scales with fire rate, right? We could go for other items that improve our gun damage here, but we don't really care about the gun damage because every bullet is the bonus spirit damage from full auto, right? Every single bullet. You have to think about this build as your bullets are magic and half of the damage is the magic damage, and the magic damage is not affected if we were to buy something like Hunter's Aura, right? Hunter's Aura is a solid pick for Gun Wraith, where our gun damage is probably higher, right? Or Point Blank, right? Our gun damage, weapon damage gets higher. But the reason we don't run these items in this build is because our damage is really a 50-50 or even a 60-40 spirit to gun, even though we're still only shooting a gun, right? We're at 760 DPS, and I think I kind of actually fucked that up. Yeah, we're at like, if we hit the head, we hit like 850. And the beauty is you can miss some headshots in this because the spirit damage does not scale with headshots. So even if we go for body only, right, we're still at like 650 DPS super early on. and I just realized I didn't even buy the burst fire, right? And this works well on moving targets, right? Because we have the slowing hex, right? This is very utility based as well. 800 damage, just body only. 800 damage, just body only. And if we pop, if we shoot mostly head, we're actually going up to like 880 or even 1000, okay? And yeah, again, as I mentioned, this is also very utility based because slowing hex is still a thing in the build. We can stop any movement abilities, right? So they won't get away from you. So if you engage, you come from the zipline, cast everything. Yeah, they're probably dead at that point. Yeah, now is when we can worry about staying alive longer, because at this point you should have enough damage to kill everything instantly, basically. Usually I buy spirit armor because it's really fucking nice, because usually they still have a lot of spirit damage. A lot of the time I also end up buying escalating resilience if the enemy has a lot of gun damage as well. And at that point, by the way, if you need flex slots, let's assume you only have 2, you can end up selling hollow point ward. And then I go for Titanic magazine, because at this point full auto lasts for like a total of 18 seconds. Probably, if you use everything correctly. You really want as much uptime on full auto as possible, and you don't want to spend, you know, half the fight reloading. So even with Titanic magazine, look at how fast this magazine empties after this. And this is with Titanic magazine, right? But again, we have Quicksilver, right? So the funny thing is, I just emptied 2 Titanic magazines and full auto is still active. And it's still active, and it's still active, and now it's over. And this is the build. If you have all of this, you're good. You win the game. GG. It's over. But everything else is just cherries on top, okay? And in late game, I am still experimenting. It's kind of early. But the reason I'm making this video very early this time is because I truly do think this is like the best thing ever. Like, I fucking love this build. I played Wraith for 6 hours today, and I felt powerful in every single game I played. If you're lacking a flex slot and you need an upgrade really badly, right? Glass cannon. Builds from slowing bullets, so you basically add even more damage, you become a bit less tanky, but you don't need the flex slot, right? Otherwise, I buy siphon bullets, because siphon bullets, again, this build has a lot of spirit armor already, right? Because we have spirit armor and we have Titanic magazine, which gives us extra spirit resist, but it doesn't have a lot of gun armor, unless you bought escalating, right? Bullet armor, sorry. Siphon bullets does give us that bullet armor, but more importantly makes us way tankier and gives us that extra lifesteal that is not affected by enemy counters, right? Like, it's not affected by decay or toxic bullets, right? So if the enemy is smart, they will try to toxic bullet you, because if they're smart, they realize you have insane lifesteal on this character, right? This is the highest lifesteal ever. So we buy siphon bullets, and siphon bullets does not get affected by those, because it's a different way of healing, right? It steals max HP from the enemy. But I always say this in late game, it really depends on what you need. If you feel like you need even more damage at this point, which if you play it correctly and you have decent aim, you shouldn't. You can also just go Spiritual Overflow first, because Spiritual Overflow gives us Spirit Power and Fire Rate, right? And we want Spirit Power in this build, because again, every addition to Spirit Power makes our full auto longer, right? And it makes our full auto do more damage. Or if you want to go mega ham, there's nothing wrong with buying Superior Duration, because again, if you compare Superior Duration to Duration Extender, it still ups every non-imbued ability by 27%, right? Whereas the base is only 14, right? So this almost doubles all the cooldowns again. And you put this on year 3, which means now we have a 10-second infuser, right? Now we have a 4-second slowing hex. Now we have a 4-second silencer disarm after they slam to the ground, right? So 4 seconds from now, they can't do anything. And then Divine as Kevlar, right? If you Spirit Power, more tankiness in ult. And Unstoppable, if you're the hard carry, the enemy will try to shut you down. And the one thing that kind of shuts down this build is a lot of stuns. You can counter this build, and I shouldn't tell you this if you're a hate watcher and you want to figure out how to beat this. Metal Skin does counter this build quite hard, negates all bullet damage, and even the spirit portion of full auto counts as bullet damage. So this really actually kind of shuts down the build quite a bit, but you know, we always have cards to back up the throw. So Metal Skin is pretty good. At this point, I had a few games where the enemy was so scared of me because they kept dying to me, right? Like I used to, I went from zipline to zipline, went in, ding, 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 you know, and they died, right, over and over. So all of them ran Ethereal Shift, right? And they would Ethereal Shift after my ult hit them, right? Because then they can stay alive. It lasts for what? It lasts for 3.5 seconds, and they can negate the entire silence and disarm duration, right? But we don't care about this, because even after Ethereal Shift is over, we still have another 10 seconds of full auto that's active, right? So, we don't really care about this ult. Or the ult counter, I should say, right? This build is 100% focused around full auto and not the ult, right? Which is why, by the way, after we max out full auto, I'm maxing out my teleport first, right? So I'm getting 2 points and then 5 points in the teleport, because the teleport gives us a bullet shield, and now it also scales with our spirit power. And because we're running more spirit power in this build, that's also a really, really juicy bullet shield on a short cooldown, right? At this point, the cooldown on our teleport is 20 seconds, actually. And then I end up leveling telekinesis. I think the final point in telekinesis is not really worth early game. It's actually quite weak, in my opinion. It probably needs a buff. I don't think it's worth a level 5 upgrade, because the maximum it does is it connects to one other enemy. It goes to one other person maximum. So it's definitely a shell of its former self. So the mass lift is worse, but it's still nice, right? But I don't think it's as valuable as having a 20-second teleport that gives you 600 bonus HP, basically, right? If you're out of full auto cooldown, if full auto is on cooldown and it runs out, you should probably back out and play slow, right? And then wait for the next cooldown. Which is why I also have superior cooldown as a situational. If you feel like you're taking a lot of long fights and you need to stay in the fight, you can buy this, put it on your 3, and then you basically have infinite uptime on your full auto. I'm not even kidding, right? So the cooldown is what, 23 seconds? And I just activated it, right? It's still active. It's still active. It's still active. It's still active, by the way. Still active. And then you have like a 4-second cooldown, and then you can use it again, right? So it's like permanent. At this point, you have permanent full auto, basically. Obviously, this is gonna reduce your damage a bit, right? It's a big investment. It's an additional 4,250 investment that you could put into Glass Cannon, Spiritual Overflow, or like, you know, Diviner's Kevlar, make you more tanky, right? I mean, this is probably Mega Troll, but if you have both superior cooldown and superior duration, it probably lasts forever, right? It's probably forever. Let's see. Okay, still active? Ooh, okay, we have a 1-second downtime, guys. Unplayable. Like, a lot of you came into chat and you asked me why Wraith feels weaker. I think if you rely on the ult as like the only way to kill the enemy, you're playing Wraith wrong at this point. You definitely do need to aim at them and shoot them. But if you follow this build and you use the ult properly, it's very fast now, right? So it's very easy to catch them, especially with slowing hex, right? And then after, you just gotta remember, they can't really fight you back for 4 seconds, right? So you can still shred them. It's just a different kind of shred. Before, you had 2 seconds to execute them and they couldn't do anything. But now you have like 5 seconds to execute them and they can run away, right? Which feels better for them probably. But if we're realistic, in a lot of cases, that's actually better. As I just mentioned against Shiv, or anything really that lasts longer than 2 seconds in the air, right? Like anything that's a bit tankier dies easier now with the new ult, right? Like an Abrahams. I'm excited for Wraith again, because I think if you play this build properly, Wraith feels like that 1v1 monster again. And this is a gun build, right? We're doing damage with the gun. Like, and half of it is spirit, which, by the way, I didn't even mention this, that's another bonus. The enemy can't build against you anymore, right? Other than rushing metal skin, they can't just go bullet armor, right? Because half your damage or more than half your damage is still your spirit damage. So they have to build against both, right? So the chances of you catching an enemy that doesn't have perfect resist against you is way higher, right? Because before, they would just all have to run bullet shield, right? Or like escalating resilience. But now you do so much diversified damage that it becomes really, really hard for the enemy to live against you. Fast after you slowed them with both slowing X and slowing bullets, you can still upgrade to Mystic Slow, right? This is a decent situational item, because Mystic Slow again applies on your full auto. It also applies on Tesla, so it applies in an AoE. So yeah, at this point they're very slow, right? And at this point it should be easy to hit them, right? And they shouldn't be able to get away. If you tuned into my stream the last 7 days, I'm sorry. I was being a whiny bitch because Wraith was just not feeling good anymore. The old ult really sucked. Next video, which I'll probably record right after this, I have a full game that I played with this build, and I'll explain everything in detail during the build. So if you're curious about that, watch out for next video, hit the sub button. I never say this, but I'll say it now. And next video, I'll go over an entire game where I run this build exactly. I'll show you everything you can do, and I'll show you how to actually carry my team. I think there was a game where both teams were very even in money, and I actually hard carried. I hope that was helpful. Until next time, see you friends, bye bye.